Welcome to the latest instalment of the Evolution Exchange podcast. Today we're live speaking to 4 tech leaders on a very intriguing topic. So we're here to discuss from engineer to engineering leadership with the aim of providing value to both engineers and engineering leaders alike. So I mentioned the four guests. So I'm going to go around the room, get some general introductions from each of them. So if you could tell me a little bit about what you do, your interests outside of work. So we'll start off with Jesper.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for having me. So I'm Jesper Munk. I'm currently the head of engineering at a crypto platform company called Coinify, where I have sort of a split role. So one is managing the engineering department on a personnel leadership practice, both for the individuals and the teams as units. And then I also cater for the agile processes across the country, across the organization. So both how do teams work, but also how do we work as an organization? How do we leverage the knowledge? How do we make sure that it flows properly? So I coach, outwards and upwards to anybody who cares to listen and who has to listen. So those are my main responsibilities. I'd say outside of work, I'm a family man. I'm married. I have 2 kids, and then when I need a break from that as well, I go for a run or I go for a round of golf when weather and time permits. So that's me.
You do know we're live, Jesper. When you need a break from that, should be listening.
Yeah.
So if we move on to Maria, could we get a little introduction from yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Maria Carstensen. I used to run a company where we did health apps, medical apps for the hospitals, but also for midwives and stuff. So I used to lead a couple of engineers. I actually went out of that like 1.5 years ago and proceeded to another position, but currently I am at VSA Radiology, where I am sitting as a product owner. It's a bit different than what I'm used to, but it's very exciting, and let's see where we go from here. So yeah, I have 3 kids. One is 1 year old, so yeah, a lot of job there, but yep, no spare time. I mean.
Thank you, Maria. And if we move on to Henrik, a little introduction from yourself, please, mate.
Yeah, hi, thank you for having me. So my name is Henrik. I'm an engineering manager at Viable Scientific, which is a radar company located in Denmark. And there I am managing a team of roughly 20 people, where we are responsible for writing all the software that does the processing of the radar signals, essentially getting all the data from the hardware teams that we have and transforming that into information. I've been working there for 8 years. So started out doing a lot of nitty-gritty details, but now I'm mostly doing managing. Outside of that, I'm married. I have 2 kids, and if I'm not with them, I practice martial arts and play board games.
Very nice. What martial arts do you do?
Karate, Shotokan at the moment.
Very nice, mate. And last but not least, Josh, if you'd like to give us a little bit of an introduction, who you are, what you do, interests outside of work.
Yeah, hello, thanks for having me. I'm Josh View, technical lead engineer for Infosys. I've been working at Infosys for 4 years, over 12 years of experience in the IT sector. I manage a global team. I'm currently technology lead for all of the EUC VDI infrastructure for our company. So it's, pretty big organization. I'm sure you've heard of us. So working on some big projects for clients in the wind industry. So outside of work, I married 2 kids, another one on the way. And effectively, other than that, I am doing football, gym, wherever time permits, outside of trying to keep a family going, to be honest.
All sounds like you've got very active family lives. When's she due, Josh?
28th of February. So.
Oh, wow. very
not
imminent.
far.
Nice.
That's my niece's
Yeah.
birthday as well, 28th of Feb.
Yeah,
Very
and my
nice.
wife's birthday, so busy times.
So I appreciate all the introductions. I mean, very different organizations, be it in the healthcare industry of Maria, crypto that Jesper's in, a radar company such as Henrik's, or information services like Josh's. But I mean, the one thing that we all have in common, or the one thing that the four guests have in common, is that they have experience leading engineers. So I'm looking to get a little bit of inside knowledge, some of the information that they have, and share it with the community. So Josh, I know you had a question to pose to the group that's very relevant to this topic.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying, since transitioning from engineer to engineering lead, what are the core challenges you find with keeping your team motivated whilst maintaining a balance between constructive criticism, empowerment, and personal development of your team?
Yeah, I'll try to start answering that one. When I was in the position of leading these engineers, one of my challenges was that the team grew very, very fast, and also outside of Denmark. And to keep them motivated, I believe it's important to give some ownership of a specific. We were at that point we were working on a hospital app for it ended up to be a corona app, so highly relevant, and we were all really, really busy on doing it, but it was very important to give people a part of an ownership of the application, to actually feel that they had a part to say also, which meant that I pulled the plug of the system to begin with, because they prefer to do it differently than what we have been taking over from the UX team. But listening to the people, hearing what they are saying, of course discussing it before taking a decision, but actually leaving the team also to have a part of an ownership on the system they are building. I believe that was one of the best things that we could do at this point, and not just forcing things on them, but still at the same time, of course, if they came with it was a very sensitive system, so you could not just put anything inside of it. You cannot just use open source as you wish when you are doing a hospital app. So there are some areas where you have to just be a bit harsh and say this is not doable. But definitely giving them the chance to affect the parts of the system that is affectable. That was one of the ways to keep them motivated and be sure that they had their hands on what was interesting.
I think it's a great point directly related to the empowerment of engineers, is keeping them motivated by providing ownership. I mean, Jesper, what's your take on this question?
Yeah, I was about to say the same, that I really like this approach of sort of very deliberately and specifically handing over the ownership, saying this is yours. Of course, there are some constraints within which you need to operate given the organization. So I completely support making very clear that the ownership lies with the team to the extent possible. So what I like to do is I have, I guess all of us do from time to time, have the one-to-ones. So whenever I'm engaging with an employee of mine, I like to spend the one-to-ones really getting to know, sort of, as I also mentioned initially, the person behind, not just the colleague, not just the skill set, but building that relationship over time then helps me better communicate the constructive criticism, because it'll be based on how do I see this person in front of me? What motivation do they have? What triggers do they have? How can I leverage that so we find some productive ways of growing and learning? So I really like to establish that quite early on, and then of course continuously build on it. That also means with the empowerment that I can trust the person and the teams in general to say, okay, I understand what type of people you are, how you take up responsibilities, how you would like to steer clear of some parts and then take ownership of other parts. So we continuously align the expectations of, you actually own this, you're empowered to do this. These are within both your skill set and your mandate to execute upon the brilliant ideas you have. So I guess it comes for me very much down to the personal understanding of whom I'm working with. That it's quite sort of ingrown in how I lead people and how I want to empower people to do that. It starts a lot with the people in there. I would say for the aspect of the personal development, it actually ties back to the same thing, because once you build a sort of a trustful relationship, it becomes more and more sort of acceptable to point out, I think you actually have some weaknesses here and there. How can we facilitate your growth in this area? And without having established sort of a trustful relationship, it's really tough to start a conversation with saying, I don't think you're doing well, or how do you see yourself performing in that area? You would need to sort of establish this over time. So for me, it starts a lot with the people, and then sort of scaling it to those aspects tied to the mentioned topics.
Yeah, I think the people approach there is the main thing you can take from that statement that you've made. And I think instilling trust is such a massive part. So how do you go about that on a day-to-day basis? You know, ensuring that they feel trusted and they've enabled that empowerment.
Yeah, that's a good question, because one thing is saying it, another thing is actually acting it and implementing it. So one thing is the one-to-ones. Of course, that's just in quotation marks. It's a scheduled conversation, but I'm always available. So what I try to do is also make it clear when I represent my engineering teams outwards, is to also have their backs, also to make sure that please don't. We have a mantra of don't give us solutions, give us problems. Because we have very, very competent people. So you don't need to sit in PowerPoint, design the pixel perfect solution, and then hand it over, say, hey, build this. This will realize the benefits we're looking for. No, tell us the problem, because we have an empowered and autonomous and all those fancy buzzwords team that are actually quite competent and can think of 5 different ways to solve the problem. And some of them might be better, some of them might be worse, but this is what they do. So that's how I try to enact it on a day-to-day basis, to really show that trust the team to give them a problem, because they're competent and they're empowered to do so. That's one of the main things, and it's sort of, it oozes through the organization. So it luckily hasn't been that big of a struggle, but it's one of the things to be very aware of, that we're giving them problems to solve rather than solutions to just mind-numbingly go ahead and implement.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great example. I think you're not only addressing the problem, but you're also giving them the option to go and solve that problem. And I think that does enable empowerment. So what about yourself, Henrik? What's your take on this one?
Well, I think I can recognize a lot from Jesper and Maria in my company. So for me, motivation is also very much about delegation empowerment. That you say that you need to do this, and you can do it how you want, but also to make sure that when you assign people that a task, that it's relevant for the company from day one. So what I've tried to do, at least, is to find a task that's not critical, so that they won't just be run over if they fail, but it's still something that will make them, after perhaps a couple of months in the company, look at a radar system that does something amazing and say, I did part of that, and sort of can recognize that what that part they did actually made a difference for someone. So I think that's important. I also sometimes it's also important to push people outside their comfort zone a bit. That sort of ties into to the whole personal growth part, because at least for in my experience, when the team grows, you suddenly need new skill sets. You can't do things the way you used to do, and both the transition can give you some growing pains, but it can also allow you to present people with new opportunities that they might not have thought of initially that they would be interested in, like project management or process development and things like that. So I think sometimes you push people outside of that. Sometimes they think, hey, that was amazing, and sometimes they don't. And then it's also important just to be able to say, okay, I hear that was not for you. We'll figure out something else, instead of saying and pushing people to continue in that direction.
Actually, just a note. I really like how you want to present some valuable tasks, so you can see that the team or the team members get a sense of, hey, I contributed to that valuable delivery. I really like that approach, to keep that as a focus on making them feel empowered and how they contribute. So that was a really good point.
Thanks. Yeah. I can just hand off to Josh.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying, what keeps us a team motivated in my eyes is, when you're trying to direct learning towards them, it's not all just about setting KPIs. You need to actually have a good dialogue, especially for me working with a global team. It's important that not only do you talk to them on a professional level, but you understand them on a personal level and understand the feedback that they provide you, and where they want to go with their growth. When it comes to constructive criticism, it's making them feel like they haven't made mistakes. You have to kind of analyze where there was a problem or something didn't go as well as expected, but also to not direct it to the individual, but to the team as a whole, So this then, because what I find in my teams is sometimes they don't want to speak up, simply for fear that they might look silly with some of the answers they provide. So this is important in ensuring that everyone feels fine. You want to be approachable as well. You want your team to want to be able to come to you and say directly, you know what, I might have done this better the next time by going a different route, but it's much easier to tackle it a problem at a time. And I always say, let's hit the low hanging fruit first. So by that I mean, what are the biggest problems you're facing, and how can you resolve those?
I think that's a great point in terms of psychological safety, in terms of ensuring that people don't feel isolated through the fails, and you create an environment where that's allowed. So I can see that all the things that you've put forward are great ways to ensure motivation. But Alina's put a question in the chat which is very interesting. So if an employee is demotivated, what approach would you take to get this back?
That is a good question.
Yeah, it is. You just need to have really good interpersonal skills. It's all great, well and good being a technical person and having that technical knowledge, but you have to balance that really well with understanding the person. And that's going back to my point earlier, where on a personal level, you need to kind of understand what makes them tick. You need to find what are their personal attributes that are really going to motivate them. So it all comes hand in hand.
Yeah. I would like to add a bit. So I also think that once you start.
Sorry, Henrik, it seems you've cut out for a moment there, mate. No, unfortunately, it just seems to be a little lack of connection. If you try and plug in the headset, maybe.
No, this is Bluetooth only.
And we've got you back there.
Okay, excellent. Sorry. So what I was trying to say is that when you start talking to that employee.
Lost them again.
Same issue again, Henrik. Anybody else like to take this one?
Yeah. I'd like to share my views on it, because one thing I also appreciate was the psychological safety aspects of what Josh mentioned before. So making you yourself approachable should also reflect on the fact, or on sort of the way people behave, that they feel approachable because you answer and accept open questions and sort of engage in that. But to Alina's question, I think it's an interesting question, because all of us discussed basically the happy path of people who want to be empowered and they want to grow and they are motivated. They want to do all this. So with demotivated employees, I think it would be beneficial to really sit down and have a heart-to-heart of where does this employee see themselves being happy. So if it's a different role, different company, or different skill set, or whatever it might be, and then find ways to get there. So usually it will be this guiding star somewhere very distant in the future or very different from today's role. And then what I like to do is break it down, to backtrack. So if you want to be there in 12 months, where can we get you to in 9 months, and in 6 months, and in 3 months, and what can we start today? So we embark on this sort of getting the motivation back journey, but actually saying, okay, these are the steps that they might be tough for now. You might have to balance doing some courses or certification or adopting new skills, but it leads us in the right direction of where you want to go, and how can I help you facilitate that journey. So I think that would be an approach of saying, okay, I can't fix your problem here now. You won't be fully motivated by next week, but let's figure out what it'll take and how do we get there. I think that would be my approach to it.
I think that's some great points that you've raised in terms of the exploration of why the demotivation occurs and ways in which you can improve it. I think it's a real action plan for anybody listening. But bringing it back to the question.
I'll agree with Jesper there, and going back to what the point he raised earlier about the one-to-one, I think that's really important and something that I actually do on a monthly basis with my team as well. So it's really important to find out, because not everyone wants to progress at the same rate. It's such a variable.
Yeah, definitely. You can come up with all the development plans you could ever dream of, and then present them to the employee. If you're not aligned, then they'll just be even more overwhelmed and demotivated.
Exactly.
It needs to make sense in how do we see them? How do they see themselves progress?
That's right. You have to tailor it towards the individual to see where they see their future focus.
But you like was mentioned just before, also to have a conversation with the person behind, because it might not be the work that is demotivating. It could as well just be some part in the privacy sphere that is kind of conflicting with the work at that time and just taking out the energy of that person. I mean, when I work with the people sitting remote, it was like by pure accident that I found out one was recently a father. Well, like, why didn't you say anything?
Okay.
I fully understand that you're tired at the moment. I mean, take a break. So it might seem as a demotivation, but actually be something completely different. So it's definitely worth to take a one-on-one with the person first and finding out what is actually the issue. Or, I mean, being a father is not an issue, but what is actually the thing going on right now, and is it something that we should do differently, or is it something that will just where you just need some time and some space?
Yes, certainly. I think some great points raised there. Thank you for the question in the chat, Alina. But Maria, I know you had a great question to pose to the group as well.
Yeah, I did, because I have some thought myself on that. So going from engineer to engineering leadership, how did you consider which leadership skills to bring with you? I mean, how did you also combo them with the technical expertise? I did quite some thoughts, so I would like to hear what your thoughts were when you went from being an engineer to engineering leadership.
I'd like to share my input or reflections on that. I think it's very interesting, since we are discussing from engineer to leadership, and I actually had the benefit of gradually transitioning. So still being an engineer, but also being given some team leadership responsibilities. And at that point, it was quite clear that, and it was no secret either, that I wasn't by any means the best developer in the team. So some clear responsibilities already made. So I transitioned more into managing the people leadership skills, the agile practices, the performance monitoring, the one-to-ones. Again, getting started actually on this, knowing the people underneath and how do we do that. So we had a clear distinction saying that, okay, some other team members were respectively the front-end tech leads and the back-end tech leads and some designers. So it was quite clear in roles that I could then leverage my technical understanding, obviously, given that I was still a full stack developer and a team lead now. So I could leverage the understanding, but I didn't sort of fool myself and believe that just because I was now named team lead, that I had all the answers. By no means. I had very competent and way more competent people than myself in the team. So leveraging their competences and knowing my own shortcomings made the transition so much easier to then focus. Okay, I'm going to focus on when our stakeholders are bothering us, or when we need to collaborate with other teams, or when management puts out new directives for whatever, then that's on me. And the technical execution, that's on you. So that was sort of the transition. And I guess over time, I've managed to leverage my background as engineer to, well, I like to phrase it that I talk tech, but I don't do tech. So I can appreciate the complexities of software development, but I don't offer solutions. But I can still act in that gap between traditional business and IT, and understand, okay, what's going on, so I can shield the engineers from those business heavy conversation and vice versa, and sort of try to bridge that gap of I don't know, translation. Maybe sometimes it seems like different languages, right? So that's how I try to leverage my technical background, and I still appreciate and understand what are they talking about. I get a rough idea of the architecture and the systems and services and whatnot, but from then on, it's the details are with the team, and I then apply a different skill set on the leadership and agile practices and organizational structures and so on. So that's yeah.
Okay.
Any other inputs, Henrik?
For me, I think it was a lot less conscious decision when the question was phrased sort of like what I took with me. And I don't think I was aware as a leader at that time when I transitioned from engineer to engineering manager. Also, our team was very small. So I think initially I started out being very sort of in the role as a technical mentor and not as a traditional leader per se. And first off, it was because I think I had 2 people in my team at that time. So it was very small, and they were both relatively new hires. So they didn't have a lot of background within the company. And also sort of the kind of work we did were very much sort of intense and closely knit with hardware and so on. So it was more startup, if you will, than sort of big business. It quickly became, though, that my primary role would be to try and shield my team from all the changes from upper management. So that became part of my day, that I would talk tech stacks downwards, and then try to figure out to avoid having new directions set for us 2 times a week, but that we could actually finish it of a task before we were asked to do something else. And looking back from my career and other companies, I feel that would probably be a common thing in in a lot of engineering companies. I don't know if it's the same with you guys. So yeah. So later it's changed. You get put on courses and the skill set grows and so on. But at least initially it was very tech focused for me. So I think it came natural because that was where I was. But it's also a good idea to sort of play to your strengths initially, instead of trying to do something that you're not actually capable of, because that will most likely not lead to a good thing.
And what's your take, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I can really relate to this question because I came up from the ground up, real grafter. So, I've started from service desk level 1, but the benefit of doing what I've done for 12 years is I've been working for, MSPs, so multi-service providers. I get exposure for a lot of different businesses, and that's allowed me to understand different businesses, their shift in focus, their different requirements within IT, and what leverages they need to prioritize. And it's I can really understand and relate now, going into a leadership role, the challenges from each level and what they face. And when I give my team a task, there's nothing that I would particularly give them that I haven't done or experienced myself. So I think that's always important to relate to. And that's really how I combined it with my technical expertise as well, in the sense that, you know, I understand what it's like to be under stress, that pressure in, you know, when you're trying to resolve real-time incidents, you know, those P1 major incidents, and, you know, you really have to get in the zone and focus. So it's really helped me. I don't take anything for granted either. So yeah, I think seeing all that and having the exposure, going from small, medium enterprises and then scaling up and seeing the problems and challenges that I've faced from the small business, and now seeing it on a bigger scale. It comes with different challenges when you work in global enterprise. A lot more, you know, procedures, paperwork, you know, so I see all the different challenges from different scopes, and so that's, I believe, has made me a good leader in understanding those challenges and being able to tackle them depending on the scenario that I'm faced with.
Some brilliant points there. I mean, from Henrik's perspective, start with your strengths, don't overpromise and try to deliver things that are undeliverable. And then from both Jesper and Josh, I think Jesper said he was a full stack developer, hands-on, engineering background, understands the role. And as Josh put it, he's a real grafter. He started off in them positions and he wouldn't give somebody something that he wouldn't do himself. But Maria, you posed this question to the group in terms of skills that you bring over into engineering leadership. So what's your take on it? What would you advise?
Well, the reason to ask the question was actually because, as I mentioned before, the hospital's app for the corona went quite crazy due to corona, and I mean, it was not meant to be for COVID at the beginning, and then just because we could like monitor patients, and they were like, oh, let's monitor the COVID patients, and then it just went nuts. I mean, the team grew very fast, and I was like not sleeping and had to follow up with the whole scaling, which was, I mean, my mistake because I scaled the team, but it was a time where I really had to think about the numbers of leaders that I have had in my life earlier on, what I thought they did good, what they did bad, what kind of leader I most definitely would not be, was a part of it. I could also look into other groups of the team. I mean, we were doing all the software for the mobile application. That was completely my team doing that. I came in as an external company. So, I mean, it was me running the project. We were doing all the software for the application, mobile application. But I was able to look to the other parts of the hospital, of the different aspects, and seeing how they did their things. And I was like, some of it was like, I'm not gonna put that into my team. And one thing that I am taking out of this is all of you are saying shielding, which was my main task at that point. Shield all the developers from all the things coming from the doctors that they want in the app, but tomorrow they don't want it. So just today, I mean, and preferably yesterday, but tomorrow it doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. So shielding was like, I mean, that was really something, and not what I expected it would. That would be my main task. And considering the leaders I have been having throughout my life so far, some of them has been really good, some of them has been really not so good. And I mean, I really tried to take the best out of it. And of course, I had to pull myself out of it a bit because I used to sit doing all the development of the applications. So it was like, I don't have time for that right now. And that was a that was a bit of a thing to, you know, it was a bit of a bummer. I can't put my fingers inside of it. I don't have the time to get the complete understanding down in all the APIs and all the things we are running, and I had to just get the brief understanding. But I believe that was like that was like a personal thing I had to work with, but the leadership, that I had to consider, how do I see myself as a leader, and I actually spent a lot of time doing that at that time.
Going back to the point you made, Marie, about the COVID situation, it sounds like they threw you a massive curveball there. How was your adaptability to such a situation that was forced upon you, out of nowhere, really?
I mean, I just looked into the hours I had, which was in the night. So I just stopped sleeping for the first 5 weeks. And after it stabilized a bit, I mean, the thing is that we had this whole, we started building the app. Actually, we started with the UX, which was not my team. I am a terrible designer, never use me for that. So the UX team had 1 month, January, to actually fix the whole setup for the app. Then we started 1st of February 2020. Wasn't it 20? Yeah, it was 2020. COVID came on March, and they were like, "Are you not done yet?" And I said, "No, we are not done yet with your application to monitor all the patients. No, we are not." So it was like crazy, also because people didn't know what it meant. We were in the hospital, so we just saw things exploding around us. I mean, that was just madness. I pulled in every developer and probably still own some favors here and there based on that one. But I really pulled in everyone I could, that I knew could help scale the product and help building the application. And then after a bit of a time, I don't know if you remember, but when it started coming more into the spring and the summer, then people were like, "Oh, that was COVID, never gonna happen again. Be free." And everybody thought that was
Bit of
it.
breathing space.
I mean, we were running the waves in this one. It was crazy. Would I do it again? Of course I would. It was
What a
one of
unique
those things you
situation, though.
I mean, yeah, you can't
Yeah.
say no to something like that. It's like, would you miss out your sleep for the next 5 weeks? Of course I would. I mean, you can't say no to that. But we got some time to actually build it afterwards. I think people understood the complexity of the application. It was, as I said, a monitoring app, and we received, I mean, 1,000 data points per minute per patient. So,
Wow.
and it had to go into a telephone, so you can see the complexity already. But it was fantastic. It was absolutely funny to be a part of.
Nice. I thought of a question, but I actually have a comment first. So I think this ties very well to Henrik's point from earlier, that you brought in the team and all those favors you still owe, but the people you brought in must have like the greatest sense of having contributed to something valuable. So that touching back to the motivational aspects of, hey, working your ass off for 5 weeks, or, well, there is a value to it. I understand the why. I can see my contribution making a difference. That must have been huge, I could imagine. But my question was actually, and sorry to keep bugging you, but you said that you sort of reflected on your past, your own managers and leaders, and took some aspects of their leadership and took it upon yourself to act that, and you definitely discarded some aspects. Do you ever consider now, how do you come across as a leader to future leaders? So they're taking parts of your leadership that hopefully they'll exercise or tailor to their leadership style in the future. Is that something on your mind?
No, but it should be.
Maybe. I don't know if I do it. I was curious.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should. I think as a human, you should reevaluate yourself from time to time, also to see which direction am I pointing to, which direction am I going to. Yeah, quite recently I did a funny small game, actually, where I put up some stories on a board. Some of them were lies, some of them were true fun facts. It was really funny to see how people place those small stories. It gives you a picture of how people look at you. I can highly recommend that small game.
I know it is a good game, and people
It
usually
is a
only
very
remember
good
the
game.
lies afterwards.
Yeah, that's a problem. But
Yeah, but those are the really great stories. Yeah, but that's nice view to get their take on how they see you. That's interesting.
So
Cool,
at this
thanks.
point, I'd like to address a great question that's been made in the chat. You all mentioned shielding from internal stakeholders, from pressure from above. But what happens when an engineer becomes stagnated or feels like they're operating on an old system? I think the example given was a legacy system. But what's your take on that? What approach can be taken to remotivate them engineers?
I would say personally, what I always recommend to my senior leadership team is you need to have some sort of development tools available, like a technical playground at least, where tech engineers can be given that environment to break and learn as much as they want to. I know it's an investment, but we have an internal learning program called Lex, which it gives a good pathway to not be stagnated on a system legacy, because it is part of the problem. When you work on some of these projects and they're 7-year contracts, sometimes technology evolves in such a way you don't want to stifle innovation at all. So there needs to be the time allowed as well for that technical investment, and just to really give that pathway to whichever skill. Going back to the questions earlier about understanding where that person wants to go, that's where you kind of build around that framework from my perspective.
I also think it's important to create, even though you have an old legacy system which might not develop a lot, when you have tasks there, you need to create room for sort of playfulness, or if you want to call it that. So you can sort of flex your technical muscles. So it might be that you need to update part of the code for just doing a quick bug fix. But if they come back and then say, well, I could simplify it by just spending a week and I could do so and so and so, I think it's important to create a space for that. Because I think everybody have legacy systems, unless it's a completely new startup. But the company I work in is more than 40 years old, so we have plenty of legacy systems. Some run on like 386 Intel CPUs, and there's a huge impact, or a huge difference in how you develop on those and versus the latest generation that we have run now. And I think people can still be challenged in making things run better, more elegantly, smoother, faster on old systems. But I also agree that if you just tell them, well, go fix that bug and nothing else, that will be highly demotivating. So yeah.
Some great points there. I mean, an old system was mentioned, engineers becoming stagnated when they're using it. Another follow-up question on the back of that somebody's posted is, what are the technologies of the futures? From your perspective, have you seen anything that you think is worth a mention, perhaps pushing in the right direction, something that seems to be rising?
I think AI massively right now. I'm sure we've all heard of ChatGPT and what that's going to do, especially in my area. So I definitely see a shift. And also from a legality perspective, I will say there's more shift towards not just public cloud, but private cloud as well. So we all know about the cloud, but with knowing that your data is secure and meeting all the GDPR and legal requirements, and within certain regions, and with so much geopolitical warfare that seems to be going on around the world at the moment as well, it's I think what I see and the feedback I receive from our clients is they want to know that their data's safe, and that that's why they're more shifting towards a build of a private cloud rather than public cloud, and putting all their eggs in one basket with, say, Amazon, AWS, or Google Cloud, Azure. etc., and having some sort of hybrid in there. And they're willing to invest in that.
Yeah, I say, given my current employer, I have to say blockchain technology, of course, is also here to stay. I'm not going to say
I agree.
Everything we say at the company needs to come with a disclaimer, not financial advice. So I'm not telling you to go and buy our stuff, but the technology underneath all of this is definitely also to stay.
Smart contracts.
Since you mentioned smart contracts, the security and the distributed ownership of a blockchain as opposed to the public cloud or these huge corporate web or cloud services. So definitely that'll also be something to look into. I don't know if was it Alina's question, if it ties to where to look. It could be a combination of the questions. Does she feel stuck on a stagnant technology and wants to say, what should I learn next, maybe? But definitely getting into this space, getting in early on, understanding some of the core components, that will be of huge benefit over the course of the next year, 5 years, 10 years. Definitely, I see it that way, including AI in this statement as well. So definitely some of the things of the future.
Yeah. For my end, I think not to because we also look into AI and see that as an upcoming game changer, but sort of software-defined functionality in hardware, because where I work, we're very hardware-oriented, but having the same kind of hardware that can do multiple things allow you to sort of do so much more with simplicity that you didn't think of when you designed the gadget. Like back in the day, you could do amazing things with the hardware of the time, but they couldn't do anything else. Right now, you might have something that works one way one day, and then the next year you come up with something entirely new that you didn't think of when you designed it. But having that flexibility built into the hardware, I think is important when you are in the field of merging software with hardware. But I think that's a little different when you are in sort of more pure software fields. Yeah.
I think some great takes there. I mean, Maria, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I would agree on the AI part. I mean, you don't get very far without, but if you're looking into learning new texts and new skills on that part, I would really highly recommend also to look into the structure of building a system, because I've just seen people, like, it's a mess sometimes how to do that, and people seem to disagree on it, even though there's not much to disagree on. So I would mean that if you want to look into AI, then start with the basic core foundation of where to use it, how to use it, and consider the new European rules on biased AI. That's really interesting, actually, to look into. But there's definitely a future there, because I've heard the penalties are fairly high.
Well, I think that really ties in nicely to the next question. I mean, great question in the chat, Alina. But Jesper, I know you had something to post to the group, which is keeping on top of technical expertise and keeping updated. So would you like to pose that one?
Yeah, it actually comes a bit close. So given that we're discussing this transition from the hands-on engineering individual contributor track into leadership, and we can't, unless we do like Maria, doesn't sleep for 5 weeks, but we can't stay fully updated on all aspects, on the technical side, on leadership, the newest trends and organizational structures and whatnot. So how do you guys best leverage, say, what's left of your technical knowledge? How do you take the past of individual contribution into your leadership? How do you leverage that past? Any thoughts on that?
I can head that up. So I completely agree. I have absolutely no time to sort of delve into the technical nitty-gritty details of stuff. So any time that I do that is in my spare time at home if I tinker with stuff. So for me personally, the technical aspect is actually the systemic knowledge that because I've been part of my company for so long, and also what I had from the previous company, is that I kind of see the interactions of different subsystems. So I can see how one subsystem interacts with another, and how they can they can sort of co-evolve, so that instead of just saying we want this and then someone else has to deliver, but they don't really understand why, I can leverage my understanding of that to making sure that if we put energy into one aspect in one department, that brings benefit to everybody, and that if we have to make important decisions on do we go this way or that way, then at least I'm aware of the implication of choosing one over the other, how that will impact a lot of the other parts of the company technology development. I can't do that for all the parts, but at least I think that is my sort of main technical reason to be to be at the company, besides being a manager. So I don't know if it's typical. I don't know about you guys. I guess you can reiterate on that if you also see yourselves as sort of being more systemic in how you view things than being really focused, as I was initially when I just came out of university. Like I want to focus really hard on that one, and it becomes less and less so.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yes, but I think for me, it's been more of like an organic growth. It's learning through working, in the sense of, okay, how do I manage my time better in certain aspects, and what do I allocate to what are most important, and what needs to take priority. And when you start to prioritize what the business needs and what your role needs, you start to organically realize, okay, the where you need to shift your knowledge transfer. And I generally do that by way of whether that's knowledge-based articles, especially in my field, or meetings where there's a knowledge transfer, and then maybe give it a month of review, and then ask questions back to my team to see how much they've actually absorbed and how much of that information they're then taking, and the confidence within them as well. So yeah, I think it is how the best way is to just organic growth effectively for me.
Good point.
I think for my part, first of all, not sleeping the first 5 weeks did not bring me up to date.
Oh crap.
No. I tried to look into getting 48 hours a day instead, but that didn't work either. I mean, you can't really be up to date on everything when you're trying to lead the team. But I think we should bring this back to the first question asked, that you give some ownership to the people, and then you actually trust them. And when you discuss the solutions with them, they have actually been looking into some solutions and can point out some things and say, this is what I suggest, and then you are able from that to pick it up. You are not able to make the research on what solutions is the best solution, but to trust the employees, to trust the people working with you, that they actually know what they are doing. Gives you the benefit of not having to dig into every single technical aspect of the system, but talking to them and making sure that the solution is the right one. Then the job is not to dig into every single detail, but to actually find out with the stakeholders that this is holding up. Especially when I was sitting with all the hospital apps, there were like multiple things that we couldn't go with. As I said before, open source were one of them. Surprisingly, also push notifications were not a thing because the system were too old. But we fixed that. We got new telephones for the people there instead. It was better. But things like that, you have some constraints. You have some things you have to consider, and that is actually more important than digging into every single technical solution. You have to fit the puzzle. You don't have to understand the whole brick, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think as well, you can't always steer the ship and look after the engine room. It's,
exactly.
you need to certainly have trust and faith in that team behind you, that they'll learn and pick it up along the way.
Yeah.
That's a good phrasing. Steer the ship and look after the engine room. I like that. Makes sense.
I like that coin term as well. I think it's a great way of summarizing it. And I think it ties very nicely to the question that Henrik posed. So in terms of the engine room, you've got to delegate at some point. So what was the question you posed to the group, Henrik?
So my question was, how do you delegate your best or most unique technical skill set, that which makes you you at your workplace, which perhaps has been defining for most of your work? And again, it actually ties well into some of the other questions, like how do you hand that off? Just do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about just like I've just touched upon, you've got to have the trust and belief, and moving around how you're going to effectively build the plan, your knowledge transfer, and build into scale of the environment you're working in, knowing your teams, knowing the layers of teams beneath you, and that's there's the next step to it, isn't it? So you almost need to have that shift left mentality, right? So it's not just delegating your unique technical skill set to the people in your team, but making sure that that information doesn't end up like Chinese whispers, and then that information then becomes disinformation. You want to ensure that that is most accurate at all times.
Yeah.
And what's your take, Jesper? Delegating your biggest skills.
Yeah.
How'd you go about it?
Yeah, I would. Well, as I hinted at earlier, I was never sort of my technical skill set was never up there with the best of my colleagues, and I had no fooling myself. So actually, I want to take my answer in a slightly different direction. So over the past couple of years, my main skill set, my defining skill set, what I did for the organizations I was in, was agile coaching and scrum mastering for the teams and to the organization. And currently in my current role, and also when looking ahead, I see myself transitioning even more into leadership aspects. So I figured maybe now I'm actually in a transition phase where my current unique skill set is something I need to delegate. So how do I coach teams to make them capable and competent and feel secure enough to facilitate the agile processes for the organization, to address the organizational structures working with agile and all these things. So what I do is I try to, first of all, figure out where have I made an impact? Where does it make sense to say, this is something we should retain in the organization, we should do more of this. I also had a ton of experiments that failed, so let's not delegate those. But then coach on, okay, how can we empower the teams for something like facilitate retrospectives on their own and have them actually be intimate and meaningful meetings? How can we do that? How can I make them capable of that? How can we coach the product discovery, the product trio, to have a meaningful discussion so we come out with some decision and we actually get some value from it? So trying to step back more and more and into a coaching role so I see that where I believe I made an impact is then delegated. And of course, I'm not asking people to do it the way I did it, but I'm asking them to acknowledge why I did it and then give their flavor and their take on it. So that's sort of my way of stepping away from my current unique skill set, making sure some of it is left behind and some of it is carried forward. So a lot of coaching, a lot of seeing where did I make an impact that I could see we could still benefit from in the future. And hopefully I got some of them right, but that we'll never know.
I believe one of my main skill sets were to find people to actually really fast speed up things for me. And I'm talking about, I have been running, when I ran my company before, I also were taking a technical degree of the master degree of DTU. So I did not always have the time to do everything perfectly in the university, but I did have the time to ask the people with the relevant knowledge. And that part I brought into the company, as I said before, when we got the COVID app, how fast I were actually able to find the people, get them in my team, and get started escalating things very fastly. I've been using that so much. So knowing people's skill set and bringing yourself up to speed on the technical skill sets is actually one of the things that I apparently do very well, and that I benefited from so many times. And that I will always bring. I mean, to any work that I will do, I will always bring the knowledge of who can do what and where can I gain the knowledge. And if somebody asks something, where can I ensure that they will gain the knowledge needed to solve a specific task. That helped me out several times, and also the people around me. So
Henrik,
that's yeah.
I know
Sorry.
this was a question you posted to the group, so I'd be intrigued to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah. Actually, I posted it because I found it really difficult. Also because, I mean, you might try to hand it off to someone and then they find out that, hey, this was not actually for me. And then you're back to square one trying to fix stuff you made 3 years ago deep down at some tech component. So for me, it's been a long period where I actually still have parts where if I got hit over the head, that functionality would be unknown. But right now I've tried to dedicate a number of people to take over from that in many aspects, not just in some of the deep technical bits, but also in the sort of structure and process parts, so that everything, whenever someone new comes along, they get parts of it. And I've tried to sort of split it out so that instead of having a huge chunk and saying, now this is yours, and they can't really complain because it's the boss's own code, so they, you know, they don't dare. But if you break it apart, it becomes less daunting, and hopefully it also becomes a bit more fun, because then they are forced to work together as a team to figure out how everything works, instead of it just being one guy who buckles under the stress of trying to figure out what is going on. I think that is, but that's taken me a bit of time before that solution sort of presented itself as being both possible and a good idea. I don't know if it's worthwhile for everyone, but at least that was for me.
I think that really supports the resilience of the team. So you don't have this was it the bus factor? So
Yeah.
how vulnerable are you if the guy who knows the service gets hit by a bus, right? So if you start by delegating the responsibility to multiple people and the team as a unit, then you have that resistance to people leaving, people not being in the office when a decision needs to be made, and so on. So that's a good point. Actually, I also want to mention, or something I thought of when you spoke before, Maria. I know we touched upon our individual delegation of skill sets, but I think you made it a good point in that transitioning into leadership also means very much being aware of where to delegate certain tasks and responsibilities. So understanding your teams or your employees or the organization as a whole, if depending on the size. So you act as the link towards, for my sake, engineering. And if I'm presented with a problem from the outside organization, then it's my job to not just pose it to all of them and see who takes the bait, but actually know where can I efficiently and effectively delegate this task, knowing that they have the competence and the sort of the cognitive capacity to solve it at the moment. So the delegation becomes part of the leadership, also in terms of tasks and responsibilities.
Yeah, it's something actually I like to do within my team as well. Really understand and get to know a skills matrix of understanding the strengths of your team members. That really helps in ensuring a project deliverables are met. So
that also brings us back to at the beginning, having a conversation with your team, saying what are you good at, what are you less good at, presenting it kind of like a sandwich, saying you are good at this, you are not, you could be better at this, and you're doing this great also.
yeah,
but
that's
it's
right.
definitely to understand that we are not all good at everything at once, and we can all improve, and it's not a bad thing to say, okay, I don't know that part of the project, I don't understand it, or I don't have the knowledge.
That's what it's about, right? Team together, everyone achieves more. So
that's a good
the whole point.
Yeah.
So just answer the question that's in the chat there. Sam Williamson's put a great question in. So we mentioned earlier in terms of giving engineers the opportunity to become project managers, giving them tasks that challenge them on a day-to-day basis. But he's put forward the opposite perspective. So once you go into engineering leadership, is there any way you can go back on that and become an engineer? And if so, which way would you go about it?
I think that you definitely can. I know multiple people who have done that. But what I also think is important to remember is that you might not go back to be the same engineer as when you left. That is part because maybe your old job is not there anymore. Maybe someone else has filled that role. You as a person probably has also changed, especially if it's been a while. I mean, if you've been a manager for a couple of years, it's probably really easy to switch back. If you've been a manager for 20, it's probably a lot more difficult because the tech stack would be completely different. But it would also mean that you could fill in different kinds of roles and being perhaps a much better support to a future manager than you would otherwise be. So I think you can definitely go back, but you probably need to consider how you go about doing it, because thinking maybe you want to go back because you remember that it was so fun doing so and so 10 years ago. But maybe you need to rethink how you go about it and what kind of engineer do you want to be instead of what kind of engineer you were. So I think that would be my take on that.
That's a good point, actually. I think, yeah, you're right. You will never ever go back to the engineer you was if you take that step back in, because technology, as we've said, is just progressing at such an exponential rate. But yeah, it's important that you don't unlearn the fundamentals, and you keep a track of where you want to go from an engineering perspective. I think there's always the scope for growth wherever your next option. So it doesn't mean you have to focus solely on leadership.
I think it's interesting. So we've spent this session talking about the transition from engineering into leadership, and we talked about what traits are you bringing in, what technical expertise are you bringing into your leadership. But the transition here, as you guys, Josh and Henrik, both mentioned, is very interesting. So what leadership traits or understanding from a leadership perspective would you bring back into an engineering role and the individual contributor track? Probably you have the systemic overview, the architecture in mind, the company in mind, while you're doing the nitty-gritty hands-on code. It might be a separate podcast episode, I don't know, but it's interesting that you would bring in a different perspective all of a sudden, having seen the leadership side of things and been in that aspect.
I think we might have a part 2 for you here, Connor.
Sounds good, mate. I'm up for it if you're up for it.
I would just like to wrap it up a bit. I did that. I went from an engineering lead to an engineer where I am at. So I used to run a team, but right now I'm sitting as a product owner at VS Audiology. The reason to jump back to this one were actually the chance given they're doing medical apps. That's one of my things that I really like digging into. Secondly, I was offered a chance to see 150 engineers were working synchronously at the same time. I just had to try it. I have never seen a company working so in sync in the system. I have never seen a system perform so well. And I'm not just saying, there are open positions, but it is amazing to actually see it, because I've been running the team. I've been having my question were like, what did you take with you? Because I had to reinvent myself very fast at that point, because growing the team very fastly and thinking, okay, what kind of leader do I actually want to be now, with all this responsibility suddenly given to me. And jumping back now, it's nice. It's nice. I never said I was gonna stay in this role, and then don't think that they expect me to. That was not what they said to me in the interview, at least. The word was something like, let's see how far you can go. But I am starting here. I am trying to see this setup. I have never seen something like that. It's really interesting to be a part of. And I am not sure that if I was the leader, that this was where I would start when I would set up a team. It's just running so smooth. I've never seen something like that. So it's a pleasure to actually be able to see that as well, and get the experience of that. I wish I had that before. Let's just say it like that.
Well, I think on that note, I'm a little bit cautious of time. So I think we've wrapped up on all the questions that are in the chat. So I'd like to thank you all for some amazing contributions today. I think, as you say, there may be a part 2 potential there, because I think it's been great. And I don't think an hour and 10 minutes was enough to get some of the points that we've discussed. And I think you'd all have more questions for one another. So back in the chat, we'll be discussing the option for that. But if you'd like to feature on a future episode, please feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, Connor Leyland, or drop me an email, connor.leyland@evolutionnordics.com. Thank you, everybody, for today, and I'll speak to you all soon.
Cheers,
Thank
all.
you very much.